The time for debate is over, and the time to prepare is now. What I want to do is prepare my family, because that's all I can do.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
The steps that we take because we want to are not stressful. It's energizing, it's exciting, it's interesting, it's fun. But the steps we take in an emergency situation because there's a crisis and we have to can be extremely stressful and very negative and much more costly and have much fewer options. And I wondered if you could just speak a little bit about some of those proactive choices that you recommend when you talk with people that they can make. They can start small, take those first few steps. Here's a few things you can start doing on your own while there's still time.
Well, and I appreciate that question, and especially the while there's still time part, because I do believe going forward that we are going to see some of the most trying times I think our country has ever seen, in our own lifetimes, and we're going to see that. Hopefully not immediately, hopefully not soon, but I believe it'll be within our lifetimes that we're going to see a tremendous breakdown of this entire system, this fiat debt-based monetary system. And all I can do personally is prepare. All I can do is take care of my family. All I can do is take care of my household. But I can't control everybody else. I can't force everybody else to take preparations. One thing that I see constantly, and I've been seeing this trend develop in the news, is that more people today are moving to the inner cities and they're moving to urban areas. They're moving out of the suburbs back to the cities again for job opportunities, for more technology, for whatever the case might be, better transportation, whatever the case might be. And so you already have 82% of America living in metropolitan areas. Only 18% of the population live outside of metropolitan areas, and that number is dwindling. So I would say that just based upon the sheer numbers of people living in metropolitan areas, when you have a town that has 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people, the law of economics is going to really kick in when there's a crisis, and that supply and demand is going to be really apparent very quickly. So I would encourage people, A, to get the heck out of these big cities. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being near one. There's nothing wrong with, having access to one. But to be living smack dab in the middle of a city, unless you have a very good contingency plan, and there are ways to survive in place, urban survival techniques, but regardless, I would say, get out of these cities. Get to a place where you have a little bit of room and the per person per capita is lower, the population density. So first thing I would say is get the heck out of the cities. The second thing I would say is obviously to begin realizing that if you are not saving any money at all, if you don't put any money in the savings every single month, then you're working for a zero profit rate. We all labor for profit. That's the whole point of labor. But profit is only money that you put in your pocket and walk away with. And if you give all of your money to Walmart and to the rest of the merchants and the corporations and the financial institutions and the advertise, if you're basically working for these guys the way that most people are, then you can't save money. And so the next step is to really begin to save money and begin to do it systematically, and to demand that you're working actually earn a profit. In other words, if you ever meet somebody who says, gosh, I work all month long and I get to the end of the month and I don't have any money left. Well, I can't save. Well, you need to tell that person, or you need to be thinking along these lines, that apparently you're giving all of your money to the corporations. Why? Because you bought into the belief that you cannot produce anything. You have to outsource all of your production.
And I think there's more than just the belief that you can't. There's a real enticing entrapment that happens there, because it sure is comfortable to go out and enjoy that urban, those cafes and that lifestyle where you're basically being that consumer and other people are doing all the manual labor for you. It's very intoxicating, and a lot of people who I think are moving to the urban areas you mentioned, it's not just for jobs, it's also because they like the nightlife. They like that urban lifestyle, and there's the the double-edged sword there is by embracing that level of comfort and convenience, you really do lose the ability to make any other choice. That's what you're describing.
That's such a great point. It is the convenience factor. But again, that's a huge trade-off. You get that convenience. But again, when crisis strikes, it's going to be a very, very negative situation. The other thing we talk about, in addition to saving money, is to doing that systematically. 15%, we believe, is what the normal person needs. Think about this for a second. The person today who is retiring with $1 million, the person who is 20 years old who wants to retire that way now, when he retires, he'll need $7 million. That is based upon a very simple 4.5% inflation rate assumed from the age of 20 out to the age of 65. So someone who needs to have a lifestyle where they can withdraw money from a $1 million retirement account today will need $7 million 45 years from now. And we don't see the savings rate going up very much. We certainly don't see incomes going up that much. So how are people going to be able to have a good retirement? Of course, we also think about the number of retirees who are reaching retirement, 10,000 every single day, and many of them do not have any kind of retirement savings. You fast forward this movie about 20 years, and you begin to see all of the baby boomers completely retired and dependent upon government benefits. Those conveniences that you receive in the cities suddenly are not as attractive because the taxes in those cities are outrageous.
And we are seeing the financial failure of multiple cities. That's the next wave. People say it's the foothills of the big mountain that we're going to be facing as a nation. But first cities, then states, and finally, entire sovereign nations going under. I wanted to circle back and press you on a couple of points you touched on. One was getting out of debt. Now, I'd like you to expose some of the falsehood of the following thinking, because I've heard this said by people is, if we have a economic collapse or a global economic reset or different terms that are used, that they say, well, if everything gets wiped out and all the electronic records get wiped out and the currency that all the things were being accounted in is wiped out, then the biggest debtor wins. In other words, the more you've taken out home equity line of mortgages and finance yourself to the hilt, that if all dollars go to nothing, then great, you come out, especially if you spend some of that money on something that's real or that lasts. Is that really a safe plan for people to think the biggest debtor wins?
Well, that's the poor person's financial plan, and we do see that quite a bit. See a lot of people who talk about a global currency reset, and I've noticed that the majority of people who talk about that and clamor about that usually don't have a plan, and so they're secretly hoping and relying upon the fact that the government will do this. That way it'll wipe out their debt, and it'll level the playing field. You see, that's what this is about, leveling the playing field. What people don't understand is that the government is never going to level the playing field. That's not how it works. And so people whose financial plan is based upon that hope need to realize that hope is not a valid economic strategy. You can't hope that things are going to change. You can't hope. All you can do is begin to make plans. So as far as the debt idea, as long as you are not in over your head, I don't have a tremendous, huge beef with having a mortgage or having some basic, good debt. I'm certainly opposed to stupid debt, bad debt, credit card debt, gas card debt, that kind of stuff. If you have mountains and mountains of that's ridiculous. But a mortgage debt and things like that, I don't see the immediate need to get completely debt free if you have a good income, if you have multiple streams of income. But I would imagine for the majority of people, they're not in that place. They really are living paycheck to paycheck, and so they do need to break free from that bondage of debt to be able to be prepared.
Well, also in a collapse situation, as we saw in 2008, there's a rush to grab the real assets. It's almost like a game of musical chairs, and you don't want to be the one without the chair to sit on. And when people had financed themselves to the hilt on these huge houses they couldn't afford with these attractive, interest-only mortgages or adjustable rate mortgages or whatever. And then when some of that system came crashing down and the jobs with it or the income with it or whatever, people really did lose property because the powers that be, as you mentioned, they have a plan. They're going to take care of themselves, and they will possess those physical assets. And if you don't own it outright, if it's something that's really that they own and you just hold the debt ticket, you can be left without anything.
That's so true. I mean, when you look back at the 1929 crash, you see that who got richer? Well, the rich got richer. How did they do that? Well, they saw it coming, and B, they positioned themselves. And the average person didn't, and they got wiped out. And so today, many people say, well, what am I going to do? Well, I guess I'll take all my money out of the banks, and I guess I'll take all my money out of the stock market. And that's not what these rich people did in 1929. That's not what they did in 1907. That's not what they did in 1987. That's not exactly how they play the game. And so, in essence, what we see coming forward as we go forward, say 5-10 years, we see very major war breaking out all across the world. I mean, I really believe that we're going to see major wars all around the world. And I think for the first time ever, it's going to impact us here in the United States. I think we're actually going to have a theater of war here in the United States. And I hate to say that, but I really believe this to be true in my heart. And so because of this, assets like oil, assets like gold, assets like silver, as you mentioned, these hard assets, it won't just be the breakdown of the dollar, because we're going to realize when we talk about these, you hear people talk about the dollar and they say, well, the dollar is going to collapse. Look, back in 2003, I was storming on stages saying this dollar is going to collapse. And it's 10 years later, and I'm still saying it. Is it going to collapse? It's going to collapse. But let me tell you one thing. The government, the United States government, is not going to let it collapse without using weapons. Now, they are not going to allow it to collapse without using weapons. That is not how the United States plays things. That's exactly what happened to Britain also. It lashed out. And so we see empires lash out as they are drowning. And we are in a very humiliating place right now with China rising to become one of the largest economies in the world. And it's very humiliating for the United States to continue to see low growth. And now we're seeing Russia and China and Iran and others moving away from the dollar like we have for some time. And all of this, I believe, culminates with war. It plays right into the narrative of how the United States operates. Whenever Iraq, underneath Saddam Hussein back in September of 2000, threatened the dollar and said we're going to price our oil in euros, it led to war in Iraq. The same thing happened in Afghanistan due to some pipelines with Iran and India and Pakistan. So a lot of, and of course what we're seeing in Ukraine is all pipeline politics. And so in essence, pipeline politics are dollar politics. And the reason pipeline politics are dollar politics is because all of the energy in the world is priced in dollars. And the United States is willing to defend that. We've already seen them defend it in Iraq. We've seen them defend it in Afghanistan. And we're beginning to see them to defend it in Ukraine. And so we believe that the United States will not go down without a major fight. They will not let the dollar simply collapse and everybody, goes broke and then, Obama goes golfing. No, there will be some sort of pretext to war. There'll be some country that we have to bomb for this particular reason, and we will start a war. And wars help the economy typically. And so we expect that before this dollar completely collapses, there'll be a war to prevent it. And so whether you believe that the dollar is going to collapse or whether you believe there's going to be a war to protect that collapsing dollar, regardless, gold, oil, silver, many of these things do very well in those times. So that's why we teach something called PACE, P-A-C-E, and this is a strategy for people who are concerned about a collapsing dollar, people who are concerned about war, concerned about these types of events going on. Remember PACE. P stands for precious metals, A stands for agriculture, C stands for commodities, and E stands for energy. All of these areas historically have done very well in times of crumbling economies due to, bad policies or war. These are the areas that you want to be in. And we've actually developed our own portfolio in a fund where we just invest in those areas. And so I think when it comes to investing, you want to think along the ideas of PACE. When it comes to saving, you want to save at least 15% of your income. And and be using, I would also recommend that people who are saving for retirement look at things like Roth IRAs as opposed to a traditional IRA, as the Roth provides you that tax-free withdrawal whenever you reach retirement. That's going to be a major, major benefit to people who don't have a whole lot of money in retirement savings. If they don't have to pay the tax man every single withdrawal in retirement, that's going to be really nice. And so a Roth IRA allows you to pay the tax man now. So I would be looking at things like that. I would be also looking at buying property out somewhere where I could have arable land. I would also look at rental real estate. I know many people talk about how a collapsing economy will destroy the real estate market. Well, it never has. Even in 1929, people were making money from real estate. And so real estate, I believe, is here to stay. As long as you're not buying a beachfront condo and hoping to get, $3,000. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a good bread and butter house in a neighborhood in a good school district. That house is always going to be occupied by somebody. And so, owning a couple of rental properties could be a great retirement income for so many people without getting too heavily in debt to buy them. So those are some of the strategies I would recommend. I think all of these things work well. So people say, well, if there's going to be a war and there's going to be this breakdown of the dollar, why should I be buying real estate? Well, what else are you going to do with your money? Are you going to put it in a tin can and bury it in the backyard? You can't do that. You got to put it somewhere.
That's what I was going to ask you earlier when you were talking about savings, that 15% savings rate it's difficult and challenging. We've had a recent guest on, I know I walked with Ann Barnhart we talked about savings accounts and checking accounts and CDs and IRAs and all the insurance and different ways and there's risks in many different places, not the least of which is the risk of the inflation that you've described, where ever since the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, there's been this approximately 4.5% per year, and we're down to 98% erosion of the value of the dollar. So that was the next question I was going to ask you, and you started to talk about that in terms of some specific things in your PACE acronym of precious metals, agriculture, commodities, and energy gives some answer to what people can look to make sure that their savings aren't just vulnerable to erosion in that way.
Yeah, because there are many eroding factors on money. If I lay a $10 bill on the table and I lay an orange on the table, and then I walk away for 10 years and I come back, I'm going to see nothing of my orange left, and I'm going to see a $10 bill that is not worth $10. And that means that money is not math, and math is not money. That means that money is a commodity. It's perishable. It can be eroded. And the eroding factors on money are numerous. You have inflation, taxation, technological advancements, planned obsolescence. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So there's always eroding factors on our money. But what we do know is that inflation is an increase in the money supply, and that means that things become worth more, not more valuable, but they cost more. And so if you own real estate, going back to that idea for a minute, and inflation continues to go up, then what does that mean? It means your rents go up. So if you buy a piece of real estate, let's say you buy a $75,000 house on a fixed interest rate where the interest rate cannot go up. You have a fixed payment. Let's say your payment is $600 a month. Okay, so you're making that $600 payment. It will not go up. It's a fixed note. But inflation keeps going up and rents keep going up. So your rent starts at $750, and then the next thing you know, next year, now it's already up to $800. 10 years from now, you may be charging, $1,200 because of inflation, but you're still making that $600 monthly payment that's fixed. So in many ways, that's how real estate is similar to gold and oil, in the fact that in times of inflation, the cash flow from it or the return on it becomes highly charged, and it rises.
So you've given us a wide variety of things that people can think about to start taking action. If I can sum it all up, but one thing I would say is don't wait. Start now, and if you want to start small, but do start following some of these guidelines that you're suggesting in terms of starting a savings plan, looking to become less of a strictly consumer and start being able to be a producer in some areas of your life, if possible, acquiring real assets in the kinds you've mentioned, and including livable land that's not in a metro area, And where can people, if they want to get more of your wisdom and insights, Jerry, where can they find you on the web, and what are the ways that they can get more information from you?
Yeah, well, we put out a daily briefing on our website every single day where we call through most of the news. Much of the news out there is just nothing more than press releases. So we call through it and we put together the stuff that really matters, the trends that people need to see. We put it up on our website at ftmdaily.com. That's followthemoneydaily.com. They can see our book there. We have lots of free articles. I mean, probably, thousands of articles there on the website, and most of it is free. I think our philosophy is real simple. If we would sum it up, we would say the time for debate is over and the time to prepare is now. So you won't find a lot of debate on our website. You won't see us poking fun at Obama, or you won't see us talking about politics a lot on our website, because we don't really care. We're too busy putting vegetables in the ground. We're too busy filling up our water tanks. I don't have time to be fooling around and talking about what Obama might be thinking. Instead, what I want to do is prepare my family, because that's all I can do. And so the time for debate is over. The time to prepare is now. And if people are interested in that mentality, ftmdaily.com, they'll enjoy that website.
Jerry Robinson, author of Bankruptcy of Our Nation and founder of followthemoneydaily.com, thank you so much for being with us here on Reluctant Preppers.
My pleasure. Thank you.